Welcome to Getting Intimate with Intimacy. I am Jamie London Wahlberg. My pronouns are he, they.
I'm Katie Jane, she, her.
And I am May. This is a space for deep exploration of the mind, body, and soul connection.
Getting Intimate with Intimacy covers consistent multimedia content spanning all forms of intimacy, from sexual to intellectual, and everything in between.
Our content is created for all beings, bodies, and abilities, age 18 and up.
And it can be enjoyed on YouTube as well as OnlyFans and Inside Timer. The links will be in the description on the live for our live streams.
We're really looking forward to experiencing the infinite layers of intimacy with you.
And remember, intimacy starts within.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome
Hello.
back.
Hi.
Getting Intimate with Intimacy. We are here for episode 23. It is our second part of our 3 parts of how has society's narratives on menstruation impacted the intimacy of all humans. In part 2, we always do a deep dive. So we are going to do a little recap on last week, and then we're going to dive in deeper and answer the deeper intricacies of this beautiful journey that we've been on, frankly, very vulnerable and triggering from last week, but we'll get back to it all. My name is Jamie, he, they pronouns.
I'm Katie Jane, she, her.
And I am May.
And we are here to get intimate with intimacy. So, May, do you want to give a little recap?
No, I think it's best that you do it today, dear.
Oh, you want me to do the recap? Okay.
Yes, please.
I will do it. Okay. So last week we opened up this whole journey with talking about our menstruation story, which I imagined was going to be sort of what the entire episode entailed, because our stories are valuable and they're important, right? It's why shows like the Vagina Monologues have become so huge, because the simple act of sharing when there is censorship, when there is pain, when people are suffering and they feel like they're alone or in silence, is to come out, is to share, to hold vulnerable space, and to create major shifts in the education, which of course, like the last 3 weeks prior, we realized once again, we are tripling down on how important that is. So I had shared my whole story of being assigned birth at female and the journey between, finding about my period, which wasn't actually the scariest part so much as the aftermath and getting locked in the bathroom to put in tampons to go to Disney and everything that came after that, within the shame and the dysphoria and the dysmorphia that I was having within my body, my gender, and everything that happened through my surgeries, my lower surgeries of my hysterectomy and my start of testosterone, and how big of a decision that was for me during that process of trying to decide, am I going to freeze my eggs? Am I not? Am I going to give birth? Am I not? And how emotionally exhaustive really that was, and how currently I am incredibly grateful to not have a period. And even though going through menopause in a fraction of the time and also going through male puberty at the same time was really stressful, I'm ultimately much happier. And I feel like because I'm more of my best self and feel more comfortable in myself, I can be that much more empathetic and compassionate in helping bridging the gap around menstruation as a non-binary person. May was talking about how it was really nothing special, and ultimately, this lack of having something beautiful to talk about it, and again, not knowing very much and what it actually meant for the body. You had also shared
Unfair.
Sorry? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it felt unfair. And that was something that we all 3 of us found very in common, that we all felt that the situation was unfair for slightly different reasons and also for overlapping reasons. And KJ had talked about knowing nothing, being hidden growing up in a religious cult, and the shame and confusion around having brothers and having to hide, having a period and not feeling any support whatsoever, and basically being majorly bullied and traumatized throughout the entire process, and what it is to develop early, because of course having menstruating leads to development in puberty, and what that can look like having it young. And I think I was the oldest to get the three of us, yeah, in terms of who got it later. Um, and feeling very alone and also unfair. Was there anything that either of you feel that I've forgotten, which is totally possible because we did touch upon a lot?
No, I think we reflected on smaller details, but on a whole, I think it's a pretty good recap. Yes, dear, I think so.
Yeah, and just the very, similar themes of lack of information or helpful information, right? Education on a basic level for most of us, lack of support, right? Lack of understanding, and feeling not right about something that should be a natural and accepted part of being a female-bodied individual, right? And the shame, the guilt, all of that stuff. And that stuff, runs deep and takes time for an individual to sit with and dismantle and to be able to work through. And having supportive community has meant so much to all of us, right, in that process of healing.
Yes. Yeah, and we're healing ourselves now. So you have been recapped. I'm proud of us. That's probably the shortest recap that we have given. We asked ChatGPT to help us with a recap, and it did an absolutely awful job. So we're going to try again. But as a result,
last chance.
a little disjointed. We're moving on, though. What narratives on menstruation were you taught by society? And how has society's narratives on menstruation impacted the intimacy of all humans? KJ, do you want to begin?
Yeah, think for a second. This is interesting to think of because, now as I've gotten older, and the learning and self-education, right, and finding community and learning about different things around the world, different cultures, it's very interesting to see where we are now as society and the way things used to be in tribal times, for instance, like with the natives, right? The Native Americans, again, when you're in a tight-knit community, a known fact, scientifically proven, is that females sync up, right? Sisters, friends, women that are in community or share the same space a lot sync up their cycles, and that they would have a whole red tent, right? That shows up in many cultures, and the women would go and separate themselves and have alone time and go through that and have the support and then come back, to the rest of society. So, and now what I've learned, as we've discussed from society, is that our period is something annoying, right? An inconvenience, a weakness, something to be hidden, something to be ashamed about or feel guilty or have to apologize that you're feeling what you're feeling in your body, so all of those stories and narratives are damaging and traumatizing and sad. And it's been, for me, that definitely, I've seen the impact that that's had on intimacy. Because even when I was a teenager and in it, right, experiencing that first uncomfortable few years, of, again, still really not understanding my body. We talked about the story of me at 15 having an ovarian cyst, right, that twisted, and I ended up having an emergency surgery. Even then, I felt shame about that. And I don't even remember if I talked to my friends about it or how I talked to my friends about it, because I felt so confused myself. right? So that society, that portion of society that I grew up in, the cult, it was just awkward all the time. There was no, and like Jamie mentioned, for me and my family, I was the only girl. Mom is not a girly girl. And so, and we weren't close. So hiding it from my brothers, not having somebody else to talk to about the very natural thing, and then seeing vast differences in friends' families. So there was other girls my age who, like the one I mentioned before, she's the oldest of 9 kids. There was 6 girls and 3 boys in that family. And the boys were like the second oldest, the middle, and the youngest. So they were a lot more open in general about walking around in their underwear, about periods, tampons, like yelling across the house about such things. Yeah, don't forget the tampons when you go to the store, stuff like that, that I would never. I was like, whoa, they're way closer to each other, to their family, to their parents, like just much more open. And so it was very confusing because I saw people that were more open and natural about it. I did not have that. And I didn't have the resources. I didn't feel, empowered enough to talk about it or to want to. And again, even at that age, once I had been menstruating for a few years, I still wasn't thinking about sex. Like I was a late bloomer in many aspects. And so I feel like, again, the lack of information, the message that many religions preach about hiding it or about, the shame of original sin in a woman and all of these things has been damaging to intimacy on all the levels, right? There's just that we talked about relational intimacy, we've talked about mental and emotional, but when you're not feeling mentally and emotionally safe, to talk about your own body, that is a hindrance. That's something that all of us have had to work through, right? Or to be able to, or if you start dating somebody new and you're like, oh my God, I'm on my period. And you make some excuse, or you tell the truth and say, I'm on my period, but you feel shame about it, right? Of like, no, I can't follow through with these plans, or, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I have my period and therefore I'm not up to have sexy time, or whatever it is. And then, of course, now the older that we've gotten and the more that we've embraced our bodies, you can have sex if you want to on your period, right? Like there are all kinds of possibilities, but when you lack information and then you also have to work through your own stories of like the shame and guilt, that definitely has an impact and a dissonance when it comes to intimacy on different levels.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, I think May, would you seem like you have something on the tip of your tongue? Did you want to?
Yeah, several things, my dears. First of all, going back to the history of humanity, just reminding us that in ancient times and the Middle Ages, there was in general a very negative perception, even ridiculous, about what the menstruation was. Like when I was now studying sexology and going back there, I've read things of like you could get cursed if you looked at a woman who was menstruating, things like this. So it's not just that Aristotle, for example, who has been considered one of the wisest men throughout history, made some remarks very negative on the woman, and some monks whose writings became quite popular also were extended throughout some centuries, and that has contributed to the negative image of the woman, of a creature that is imperfect and impure. Even also, if I'm not wrong, in some other cultures, there are some temples where you cannot get in if you are menstruating because your energy is not right. So whether we like it or not, this was what has influenced, even in the shadows, our culture, about what a woman is and particularly what the menstruation implies. So when we get to us, there is no proper information. First of all, there is no consolation for it. You're kind of told, now you are a woman and you can have children. Yeah, but I'm not interested in having children when I'm 12. What I'm seeing is that I am bleeding through a hole in my body, that this is going to happen every month. It hurts. It changes my mood and how I feel about myself and about the world. And I am supposed to hide it because it's unpleasant for everybody. So my experience with, I think, so many other women is starting womanhood with the wrong foot. Because I mean, you cannot blame the government or your parents for you to bleed. This is part of biology and nature. And even if you find it cosmically unpleasant or unfair, it's not to blame on any human being. But the human beings who are older than you and for whom this information is not new, they should prepare you in a way that you can accept it as soon as possible, and even and have a neutral experience. If it's positive, even better, but at least to neutralize a little bit the unpleasantness in the body and in your mind that this implies, and to make it socially the most respected and natural way to compensate the part of you as being living in a female body that you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life, or for the rest that the menstruation is going to last. So that's where I see that society still has. We've been improving, obviously. Now, for example, we see advertisements where they don't use blue liquid to show pads and how it works. And now they use red liquid because it's what it is. So let's just stop being ridiculous about things that are natural and exactly the way they are. We have improved as compared to the 20th century and then, of course, previous times, but there's still a great job to do altogether.
I'm so grateful for both of you for various things that you brought up around the history, both personally and also worldly, and throughout different cultures. I'm realizing some really interesting things that are definitely not fully formed in my brain, so I don't know how much these thoughts will flow, but I can promise they will be profound. And though I do not want to start here, I don't want to forget something that I already almost forgot to bring up, which was that I haven't stopped thinking about something that KJ said last week that we forgot to mention in the recap. Oh my god, it's already starting to escape me. Don't do that. It was this is so frustrating. It'll come back to me. It's because I made the mistake of saying that I didn't want to start there, and so they're like, "Great, let's funnel that thought to the back." It'll come back to me. That's super annoying because it's been on my mind all week. Okay. You know what, KJ, you try to remember what it was that you said because it was really epic and we did not mention in the recap, and I want to talk about it, and it relates to this. Meanwhile, I'm coming back to what May was saying. May mentioned something that had me sort of start to connect a lot of these dots, which is talking about how historically there's all of this record around basically proof that they decided to put together to try to say these experiences of menstruation and for these reasons, etc., because of it, women are weaker. And why? I mean, that's important for many reasons. What I'm realizing right now is what's important about this is the initial reason for this is no different in my mind than what happens with religious documents and narratives, which is that all of these started as an ability to control, to have the power, to have the upper hand. And this comes from insecurity. And so, prior to any discussion of anyone who was not a woman having menstruation, the narrative was great. We felt really inferior and insecure as men because women are like pushing out babies and creating life. Let's create a story that shows that actually, while they're on the way to this, they're actually, weaker. And so, like, we can control how the care goes, we can control how this narrative gets spun, and it becomes then this story that those who are menstruating have to battle up against that, because then there's shame and insecurity of, well, we're weaker, but then also like we're not weaker, right? Because even at those moments when we feel shame, there's at minimum this little primal part of us that remembers we're amazing, and that menstruating is a part of the process of the creation of existence, which is the most miraculous thing across the human experience, and happens, from what I can guess at least, majority of species, even off planet, are also engaging some form of this in order to create life. So this is a widespread miracle. So then it becomes this whole fight between these sides, but really both are just super insecure and wanting to be appreciated, belong, want to care, have value, want to be respected, all the things that we talk about all the time that are foundational. So all of these narratives that we're building to women being weak were serving a very specific purpose and narrative. Now, currently in modern days, a lot is changing. And now this power struggle is unwrapped, and it's not going back into the box. Everyone is aware that it's happening and are looking to change it. And so in deconstructing this, we're looking at all these different narratives that got us there based on all this different proof. And something that was coming up for me as I was listening to both of you and thinking about our experiences is that the narratives that I grew up with around menstruation, in a way, were just highly scientific. There wasn't any of this emotional support, like how KJ started in this discussion talking about the red tents, which, interestingly enough, I used to be sort of upset about that separation, because I was like, why are you separating them out of society? I hadn't really thought about the fact that, this is a space for them to get space and to support one another. But all three of us didn't feel supported. And so it has me realize that one of the ways that, like, in a way, it almost feels like a compromise. And, like, again, this is all theory that's coming through my brain right now as I'm, like, starting to put things together. I'm not fully landed on any of this. But, like, theoretically, I can see how a compromise of how do we get the care, how do we rebalance the power, is by getting really scientific about it, because it's a scientific event that's happening with your body that allows you to get the care that you need, because it was a lot about research. Women and female bodied individuals overall are under researched, famously, because the majority of the medical community has been led by those who do not menstruate, and who do not go through a lot of these different um, dis-ease experiences that those who are female bodied and do menstruate can experience. So I'm seeing how this is like really woven in a total clusterfuck of a situation that is really a power struggle based around like a miraculous superpower of nature. And the result of this is basically no one's happy, because I don't even hear that the men are happy. So what I'm seeing is that the narratives on menstruation that I was taught were quiet, separative, and scientific, non-emotional, truly terrifying, and very confusing.
And negative.
And negative, which I'm pretty sure everything I just said really has really, I don't think anybody saw that was positive, but yes, and negative. And what I'm seeing is possible, leading into our, which both of you had started to touch on, and like leading into our next question, which is like, what are the narratives that we want to have in society? As gender is expanding and humanity's consciousness is expanding, and we're loving ourselves unconditionally, we're understanding everything more, we are having this opportunity to shift and balance a power struggle so that there isn't a power struggle. So the narratives that I want to see go into society, to me, go beyond the primal need and truth of the natural beauty aspect, and leaning immensely into a very empathetic educational environment where everything is destigmatized and deconstructed. And like I've been saying since day one, separating the sexes for long periods of time, or even initially, don't make any sense. There's like a very tight window of time that I can think of where it's useful to do that. But there's so much more to consider now, because because humans are more complex now, and our understanding of who we are and how we connect to menstruation is different. I think we have a chance to correct and upgrade a lot of what's happened. What are your thoughts, May?
I was just also going to say that because with menstruation and our cycles made us very active emotionally, as we were not linear as compared to as compared to males in general. I'm always speaking in general. That also was seen as a weakness. You not being more or less in the same energy every single day means that you are unpredictable, and that that's not positive. Instead of seeing maybe that your monotonous emotionality could be also seen from a negative perspective. I can see things from all perspectives. So now that you're seeing mine from a negative perspective, I can also see yours from a negativeness perspective. But why don't we, all of us, see all the positive perspectives of being more volatile emotionally or not, because of your biology and your and the hormones that dominate your physical existence. So that became also part of the narrative, I think, especially in professional environments where I've heard this many times, where females were not chosen as directors or very high positions within the company because, they're not that stable, basically. Um, and that's very, very disrespectful and also very biased in the perspective of a woman. And so in that sense, many males supported themselves in being at the top of society for so many reasons, so that to some extent and at some point they could have a use of the female in the way that it was useful to them. I am not very much affected by this, but I cannot say that I still don't have a wound about how the male throughout history has treated the female. So it's not that I'm going to have a strong reaction about it, but at the same time, I think it has been so disrespectful that I don't know where to start or where to end with this. Um, I just want to say that thank God that we all started raising our voices, especially the female communities, in bringing our honor back as humans and what we are capable of and how complex our nature is, which doesn't mean it's complicated or negative in any perspective. It's just that you have to look at it in the right way, and of course it cannot be without the perspective of the own being that you are observing from your perspective, which is on a biological level quite different. And something else that we, for example, touched on last week, before we forget, it was the smell. Do you remember this?
Yes, that wasn't what I was trying to remember, but it is good that you brought that back up. But I'm still so annoyed that I can't remember.
So
Continue
yeah,
though.
this is I mean, this one is probably one of the most annoying or difficult to accept with, because even if you want to be the cleanest person that you can be, if you're using pads, this liquid has its own smell and there's nothing you can do about it. I had an experience that was at least one that I can remember that was quite unpleasant. I was in at a hotel, a small, rather small room, um, and so my boyfriend came. I was 22. My boyfriend came and he complained about the smell, and after 10 minutes he asked, like, are you on your period? And I'm like, yes. He says, so that's your period? And I'm like, it can't be my period because I had a shower an hour ago and I'm wearing tampons, so it's very, very unlikely that it's me. Well, half an hour later, we realized, or I helped him realize, that it was the air conditioning, which had a very weird smell, and that he associated with me and my period. Now it's funny for me now, but at that moment and at that age, I felt very uncomfortable. Even if he didn't mean wrong, but it wasn't nice at all. And that also, it comes from the lack of awareness, information, respect, compassion. as to what is appropriate or inappropriate to say, or how you say it. This is very, very important, that as a society we grow in this sense, being very, very well informed and very empathic with one another.
Well said. Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, is that empathetic education,
Mm-hmm.
and what that really means across generations and across cultures. KJ, what are the new narratives that you want around menstruation? Is there anything you want to add? And did you remember what you said? That was amazing.
I don't remember what I said. Sorry. So here's a fun fact. This is one of the things that I have found annoying in the last couple of years, because I've come to realize, I've heard people, both genders, all genders, refer to pregnancy brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I can't remember shit because I'm pregnant. Hello, it's the same hormones for PMS and your period. And add neurospiciness, ADHD, and the tism, and it gets like, it's like ADHD amplified, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's something I've struggled with, and I'm about to start my cycle. As we're talking about this, so I am PMSing and feeling a little brain foggy, but so I couldn't pull back the archives from last week. I'm sorry about that. But May did touch on a couple of things. But that's part of it, right? Is a lack of education and understanding that actually my hormones that are moving around in the lower part of my body do affect, my brain and my overall.
Absolutely.
And am I able to move through the, day and through the world? And I've been really just gentle and resting with myself yesterday and, today, because I'm feeling all of the things in my body. I moved my chiropractic appointment, for instance, from this morning until later after this is done, so that I was not rushed. I hate being rushed in the morning. I wanted to take a nice long shower, which I did. So those things, I wasn't taught. I had to learn this level of self-care. And the other thing, so May did say a couple of things that touched on what I've been thinking. And what I've been thinking is this integrated teaching of coming at it as cyclical beings, right? And talking about the different phases of the cycle, the luteal phase and I still don't know those. Like, for myself, I've not gone as deep as to dive into those and track those. And the period tracker app that I use is a very basic free one. So it is not that in depth, but, the information is out there right now. Things have changed, right? There is so much more women talking about menstruation and things like that. May also said, the communities that have come together, communities that have formed, voices, that are being heard, right? And things are being more discussed and open, which I super appreciate, because it's definitely been a positive part of my journey, right? At least being able to read or to hear other women sharing, right, about these things, knowing that there are 4 phases that we do move through during the month, right? So that our energy levels and things change and fluctuate based on the hormones that are in the body that we live in, right? But again, going back to the idea of the red tent, they were honoring that cyclical nature, and they were much more in tune with Earth cycles. We are cyclical beings living on a cyclical planet, right? And so some of the more earth-based traditions, like the Native Americans, kind of honored those cycles better, right?
Some African tribes as well.
Right, definitely. Yeah, lots of different tribal societies, because they are so close together by default, I think. And part of the issue with our society today in America and other parts of the world is that there's so much more separation. The nuclear family, people living in separate households, right?
The toilets.
Families separating, the toilets being separate, right? All of these things that have, and Jamie said, the narrative of separation, right? And so that's something that we've been talking about, is changing that narrative to one of more integrated, right? Of, hey, this is how things are for people with these kinds of bodies, right? Like, let's all, as all genders, like work together to understand and support each other, right? Because we human differently depending on the bodies that we are in. So, and to shine the light on that as normal and like accepting and supportive around this, because clearly there is a massive lack of support and education as we've continued to discuss. Let me make sure that there was something else. Oh yeah, and the other thing that we're talking about the education and talking about how we feel, and even more so like highlighting, especially for people that do menstruate, like the fact that, like, we've talked about how the negative stories exist. And what I have loved learning about and hearing and from others is highlighting the positives, right? And making it like May said, we didn't even talk about the fact that, your feelings change and your mood, right? But the fact is also, because your body is working up to that act of creation, your intuition is heightened, right? Those feelings and sensitivities should not be shamed. They should not be denigrated or second guessed, or you're too sensitive. You're more sensitive, yeah. And that can be a good thing if you are in touch with your body, if you are loving and nourishing your body through these cycles and through these cyclical changes, right? Because, and like honoring like the need to release. Your body is releasing. So if you're feeling your feelings, it's okay to cry and release that too. I spent about 3 hours crying this morning. There's other things going on in life, and my emotions are heightened, and I've been needing to release, right? So I was just like, okay, this is where I'm at. I'm gonna just let this happen. So yeah, but that overall acceptance of all the different facets, right, that go into the experience of menstruation is really valuable to continue to talk about and get better at education.
Yep. There's a lot to unpack, and it's true. I was never told anything positive ever about menstruation outside of the fact that it meant that you could have a baby, and that was it. And and it is true that there's so much that is powerful around menstruating. And one of the things that I want to come back to again, and more, is that those who are trans and non-binary get erased instantly in these conversations. And this has a lot to do with that power struggle. And it's got to stop, because the more that we've gone into our conversation, I have less doubt than ever that if I had empathetic education and I was not separated out when I was, when we're super young and we start any form of education, I would have realized that I was trans non-binary way sooner, because I was already navigating body dysmorphia and confusion by the time I was like 4.5, 5 years old. So, I understand that it's a very sensitive time and topic. There's a lot of very fine lines around what is appropriate and safe in order to decrease sexualization. And as we've been talking about, when you're a kid and this stuff happens, that's not what you're thinking about. You're not thinking about sex. You're just thinking about what's happening to your body and how you feel strange.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore you don't feel safe, and how to support around that, so that way we can prevent the lack of feeling safe and the fear and the confusion. If we continue to hide things, we are not going to break ground. And if trans non-binary people, especially teenagers, because at this point, that the generation that's teenagers right now are incredibly wise and aware within their self, light years before even us millennials. And like, the reality is that is going to continue to accelerate, and they're going to get younger and younger and younger when they come to have this awareness and they start to learn things. So we've got to shift, sorry, it's cliche, but it's true. We got to shift with the times in order to make it possible, because they're understanding their gender more. And this is not just about sex. This is about your gender. This is about what's in between your ears, how you actually feel about yourself. We can't exclude and separate.
But you know what really helps with that? That you see examples of you in society.
Yeah.
So if you know that, because sometimes it's very difficult for yourself to figure out who you are, but suddenly you see in someone a representation of an energy that is within you, and you say, I am like that person. So I need to change this so that I can be like that person, because that's a more appropriate or precise expression of me. But if you don't have any representation in society of you, because any social narrative has cut you down of what is appropriate or positive or whatever, then it's more difficult for you to realize who you are. Sometimes it's by comparison and identification that we figure out who we are.
Totally agree. And we are getting to the spot we're going to wrap up here. I just wanted to add one quick thing.
Yes.
We've been talking about how these narratives and our experiences have impacted intimacy. And one of the huge benefits that I see of being more open, right, and accepting and all the things that we're talking about, positive education and support, is actually would build intimacy like so much more. Because imagine if all of the humans who are menstruating, right, and going through this on a regular basis had sufficient and caring support from their partners, right? And then also as a partner to somebody that menstruates, knowing, right, how to hold and support somebody during that time massively builds intimacy, starting with emotional intimacy.
Yes.
I do see we have some comments.
Wait, though. I just want to say, though, because you brought up just like a whole other universe of conversation around this, and you were just like, yeah, anyway, the comments. Yeah, we totally, I mean, there's so many layers to this that we have not touched upon. And, next week is our integration session. We're probably going to come circling back around, and menstruation is going to be part of other topics. But, like, yeah, it's super important to talk about how partners, and also when you're younger, just friends.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of my friends were dudes, little boys. They had no freaking idea what was going on. They were useless and frankly mean and annoying about it. So, like, 100%. But yes, go ahead and navigate the comments, and then we'll wrap up.
I want to say hi, Cheller. So excited.
Yay!
Yay! That's so awesome. Super awesome that you're enjoying this. We do recommend that you go back and listen to our other episode. And then next week, you could join us for the integration session. And yes, I see that Lee is here. Also welcoming Cheller, mutual friends. So if there are not any other questions, thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Jamie and May, for all of the vulnerable, shares. Like you said, we've gone to some triggering places. I was triggered this morning. I was like, really? This right now? Like, of course, I'm PMSing with the full moon in Scorpio. I'm a Scorpio. It's good times. Lots of emotions. And here we are.
Yes. So we are here. So next week, we're going to have our first official integration session. What this is going to look like is we'll do the briefest little recap of what we talked about, and then we will dive into actual service to integrate within our gifts. to help us to actually integrate what it is that we've been talking about. And this may look like anything spiritual, metaphysical, and in between from the three of us. I have not fully decided what I'm going to be doing, but it's probably going to be some sort of sound bath, sound integration, and whatever it is that we are meant to do is going to be what's going to happen. So you're going to want to be there because, as we know, this is all being stored in your body, the emotions that we hold in our body. And so by coming, even though we're not going to be doing some sort of deep dive, verbally, we're going to have the opportunity to gain clarity, to release the shame and whatever is no longer serving us, and to prepare for this future that we are all manifesting. That's much more empathetic and accurate education.
And united as well.
Yes, and united as well. And remember, intimacy
Start within.
We love you unconditionally.
We love you.
Namaste.